The doctor's hands were shaking. I watched her stare at my file, and I realized she wasn't looking at the ultrasound screen where my baby's heartbeat flickered in black and white. No, she was staring at the paperwork, specifically at my husband's name printed in neat block letters on the top of the page. Then she did something that made the air leave the room. She reached over and turned off the monitor. She just switched it off mid-exam, like someone had pulled a plug on my entire life. The room went silent. The comforting rhythmic whoosh of the heartbeat stopped. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. "I need to speak with you privately right now." She stood up, her movements stiff and jerky, and led me to her office. She closed the door. Then she locked it. I heard the click of the deadbolt, and I thought something was wrong with the baby. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Every worst-case scenario flooded my mind in 3 seconds flat. But then she sat down across from me and said words that made my world collapse. "You need to leave your husband today, before you go home. Get a divorce lawyer first." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. It was a nervous, hysterical sound. "What are you talking about? Why? We are having a baby together. We are happy. I don't understand." "That is exactly the problem," she said, and her face was white as paper. "What I am about to show you will change everything you think you know about your marriage. But let me start from the beginning because you need to understand how I ended up in that office 4 months pregnant, learning my entire life was built on lies told by the man sleeping next to me every night. My name is Daphne Wilson. I am 32 years old. I work as a marketing director at a boutique firm in Connecticut, and I come from what people politely call old money. My grandmother Eleanor passed away 5 years ago and left me her estate. It was about $2.3 million in a trust, plus the historic Wilson family home where 5 generations of women had lived, loved, and raised their children. I never flaunted it. I worked hard at my own career. I drove a 10-year-old Subaru and bought my coffee at the same place every morning. The inheritance was security, not identity. But it made me a target. I just didn't know it yet. I met Grant Mercer 4 years ago at my family's annual charity gala. The Wilsons had hosted it for decades. That year, I was standing at the bar trying to escape a conversation with a man who had asked about my financial situation within 3 minutes of meeting me. It was so subtle, so gross. Then Grant appeared. He was tall, with dark hair and an easy smile. He asked what I was drinking. He made a joke about the terrible jazz band. He didn't mention money once. He claimed to be just a financial advisor who had gotten a last-minute invitation from a colleague. He said he had no idea who the Wilson family was. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. A financial advisor who doesn't research the host family of a major charity event? That is like a chef showing up to a cooking competition saying, "Oh, are we making food today? I had no idea." But I was tired of obvious gold diggers, and here was this charming man asking about my favorite books instead of my bank account. We dated for a year. Grant was attentive, thoughtful, and remembered the smallest details. He insisted on paying for dinners, even though I could have bought the restaurant. He seemed so genuine. My mother, Vivian, saw through him immediately. After their first meeting, she pulled me aside into the kitchen. "That man's smile doesn't reach his eyes," she said. "Something is wrong with him, Daphne. I can feel it." I told her she was being paranoid, overprotective, jealous even. We fought about Grant constantly. Eventually, we just stopped talking. 2 years of near silence between me and the woman who raised me. Birthday texts and nothing more. All because I chose to believe my husband over my own mother. Spoiler alert, Mom was right. And she has been waiting patiently to say, "I told you so." At this point, she has absolutely earned it. Grant and I got married after a year of dating. It was a beautiful ceremony at my grandmother's estate. He cried during his vows, tears streaming down his face as he promised to love and protect me forever. Looking back, those were probably the most honest tears he ever shed, not from joy, but from relief. His long game was finally paying off. After 2 years of trying for a baby naturally, we saw a fertility specialist. The diagnosis hit like a truck. Grant had severe male factor infertility. His sperm count was almost non-existent, and what little he had barely moved. Natural conception was essentially impossible. Grant seemed devastated. He cried in the car for 20 minutes. He apologized over and over like it was his personal failure. I comforted him, told him we would figure it out together. That is what marriage was about. What I didn't know was that Grant wasn't crying from grief. He was crying because his plan had just gotten significantly more complicated. All that emotion was him recalculating, not mourning. We decided on IVF with a specialized procedure called ICSI, where doctors inject a single sperm directly into an egg. It was our best chance. Grant insisted on researching clinics himself. He found one he said was perfect. He handled all the paperwork. At the time, I thought he was being supportive because I was so emotionally drained. The first cycle failed, and it was devastating. I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. Grant held me, whispered encouragement, promised we would try again. The second cycle, 7 months ago, worked. A positive pregnancy test. 2 pink lines that changed everything. I cried happy tears. Grant held me close, already talking about nursery colors and baby names, and the future he had always dreamed of. Then, casually, he mentioned I should update my will now that we are a family. He said I thought it was sweet, practical, the kind of thing a good husband thinks about. I had no idea he was already counting my grandmother's money as his own. Everything seemed perfect. The loving husband, the baby on the way, the life I dreamed about since I was a little girl playing with dolls in my grandmother's garden. I had no idea that in just 3 months, a stranger with trembling hands would show me documents that would burn my perfect life to ashes. And I had no idea that the fire had been set by the man sleeping next to me every single night. 4 months pregnant, and something had shifted in my marriage. Small things at first, the kind of things you notice but explain away because the alternative is too painful to consider. Grant started keeping his phone face down on every surface. He put a new password on it that I didn't know. He would step outside to take calls, come back saying it was work stuff, and change the subject before I could ask questions. He claimed he was restructuring client portfolios during these late-night calls at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. Now, I am no financial expert, but I am pretty sure the stock market takes weekends off. Unless Grant had secret clients in Tokyo, which he definitely did not. Something else was going on. The late nights at the office multiplied. 3 times a week, sometimes 4. He wouldn't come home until midnight. He is a financial advisor, not an emergency room surgeon. What could possibly require that kind of schedule? I found receipts. A restaurant downtown I had never been to. $280 for dinner for 2. A hotel in the city 40 minutes from our house. Why would my husband need a hotel room so close to home? When I asked, Grant had answers for everything. Smooth, practiced answers that came just a little too quickly. Client dinner. Important networking. The hotel was for a conference that ran late, and it just made more sense to stay over than drive home exhausted. And when I pushed harder, when I asked more questions, his tone changed. Daphne, you are being paranoid. It is the hormones. My mother warned me about this. Women get irrational during pregnancy. Don't turn into one of those wives. I felt ashamed for even asking. That is how good he was at this. He made me apologize for questioning him. The financial pressure intensified around the same time. Grant's requests about money became more frequent, more urgent, more creative. We should add me to your trust, he would say. What if something happens during delivery? I need to be able to access funds for the baby. It is just practical. Power of attorney is common sense. Every married couple does it. Unless you don't trust me. Your grandmother's house is too big for us anyway. We should sell it. Invest the money properly. I know exactly which funds would maximize our returns. The man wanted me to sell my grandmother's home and let him invest the proceeds. This is the same man who insisted we needed 3 different streaming services because he couldn't remember which one had his shows. That is who I should trust with $2 million? Absolutely not. When I said no, gently and carefully, Grant's warmth evaporated. He became cold, distant. He started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, claiming I moved too much now that I was pregnant. The arguments became more frequent. He would bring up the trust I refused. He would give me the silent treatment for days. His silent treatments lasted exactly until he got hungry. Funny how that worked. Apparently, his principles had a time limit, and that limit was an empty stomach. He barely touched me anymore. He blamed my changing body. He said he didn't want to hurt the baby. It sounded caring on the surface. It felt like rejection in my bones. I tried to talk to him about it. He said I was being needy, hormonal, difficult. I started to wonder if the problem was me. One night, I woke up at 2 in the morning and Grant wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his phone, speaking in a hushed voice. I stood in the hallway and listened. "It is almost time," he was saying. "By spring, everything will be settled. Just need to wait until—" He saw me and hung up immediately. "Work emergency," he said. "Go back to sleep, honey." I didn't ask who has work emergencies at 2 a.m. about things being settled by spring. I was too tired, too pregnant, too desperate to believe my marriage was still okay. My best friend Tara came over for lunch the following week. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and watched me make excuse after excuse for Grant, his stress, his work pressure, his adjustment to becoming a father. Finally, she put down her fork and looked at me with those eyes that had known me since college. "Daff, listen to yourself. When is the last time you talked to your mom?" I didn't answer. "When is the last time Grant was actually happy to see you? Not performing happy, not putting on a show for other people. Really, genuinely happy to see you walk through the door." I couldn't answer that either. "Trust your gut," Tara said. "Something is wrong here." I told her she was being dramatic, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grant's phone, always face down, his late nights, his sudden obsession with getting access to my money, the way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention, like I was a math problem to solve, not a person to love. 4 months pregnant, regular OB appointment for an ultrasound. My usual doctor was on vacation, so I was scheduled with a colleague instead, Dr. Claire Brennan. I went alone. Grant had a client meeting he absolutely couldn't miss. Standard appointment, nothing special. I laid back on the exam table, cold gel on my belly, waiting to see my baby dancing on the screen like always. Dr. Brennan was pleasant and professional. She made small talk while setting up the equipment, asked how I was feeling, if the baby was moving much, all the normal questions. Then she opened my file, glanced at the paperwork, and her face changed. She looked at my husband's name, looked at me, back at the name. I saw her hands start to tremble. She set down the ultrasound wand, reached over and turned off the monitor completely. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, and her voice was barely above a whisper, "I need to speak with you privately right now." I thought something was wrong with the baby. Every worst-case scenario flooded my mind in 3 seconds flat. She walked me to her office, closed the door, locked it behind us, and then she said words that cracked my entire world wide open. "I know what your husband did, and I have proof." She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Her hands were still shaking as she opened it. "My younger sister works at your fertility clinic," she said. 3 weeks ago, she came to me crying. She told me everything. When I saw your husband's name on your file just now, I recognized it immediately." Dr. Brennan took a deep breath. "Mrs. Mercer, I am so sorry, but you need to see this before you go home, before he knows that you know." She laid the folder open on her desk between us, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my pregnancy, and the man I loved turned to ash right in front of my eyes. The room felt incredibly small suddenly. The air conditioner was humming, a low drone that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. I looked down at the documents spread out on the mahogany desk. They weren't medical charts. They were emails, receipts, and a signed confession. Dr. Claire Brennan's younger sister, Molly, worked as a nurse at the fertility clinic, the same clinic my husband had so carefully researched for our IVF treatment, the clinic he insisted was perfect for us. Now I understood why he had been so particular about that choice. Claire explained everything. Her voice was steady even though her hands weren't. 3 weeks earlier, Molly had shown up at Claire's apartment close to midnight. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. She hadn't been sleeping. She had lost weight. The guilt had been eating her alive for months, and she finally couldn't carry it anymore. 7 months ago, Molly told her a patient's husband had approached her at the clinic. He was charming, well-dressed, seemed desperate but reasonable. He said he had a special situation that required discretion. His wife didn't know, he explained, but he was using donor sperm for their IVF cycle. Some family genetic issue he didn't want to burden her with. Nothing sinister. He just needed help keeping it quiet. He would pay well for the assistance. $30,000. For a nurse making $52,000 a year, drowning in student loans and credit card debt, it was impossible to refuse. Molly helped switch the samples. Grant's sperm, which couldn't have produced a pregnancy anyway, was replaced with sperm from a paid donor. The embryologist was in on it too. Grant had approached him separately with another payment. Between the two of them, the switch went undetected. The embryologist told Molly not to worry. The husband knows what he is doing. It is not our business what arrangements married couples make. But it ate at Molly, especially when she saw in the clinic records that the pregnancy was successful. Somewhere out there was a woman carrying a baby she believed was her husband's child. And it wasn't. The guilt destroyed her. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror. She called in sick constantly. She started having panic attacks at work. 3 weeks ago, she finally broke. She told Claire everything. I sat in that office listening to Dr. Brennan explain how my husband had spent $50,000 to frame me for cheating on him. $50,000. That is more than he spent on our entire wedding, including the honeymoon. I guess I finally knew where his real priorities had always been, and they definitely weren't the open bar. But there was more, so much more. Claire laid out the complete scheme, the plan Grant had been building piece by piece for over a year. Phase 1 was already complete. Bribe the clinic staff, switch the sperm samples, make sure everyone stays quiet. Phase 2 was also complete. Wait for a successful pregnancy. Play the devoted, excited father-to-be. Build the perfect image. Phase 3 was planned for after the baby was born. Grant was going to have the embryologist alter the clinic records. The paperwork would be changed to show that our second IVF cycle failed. That way, it would appear we had conceived naturally afterward. Phase 4 was the trap. After the birth, Grant planned to suggest a DNA test. He would frame it as something sweet and sentimental, proof of fatherhood to hang in the nursery, a celebration of our family. And Phase 5 was the kill shot. When the DNA test proved he wasn't the biological father, and when the medical records showed we had supposedly conceived naturally, he would have all the evidence he needed. His wife had cheated on him. The baby wasn't his. He was the victim. Our prenup had an infidelity clause. This is common in wealthy families to protect the assets. If one spouse cheats, they owe the other spouse $500,000 in penalties. Plus, the cheating spouse forfeits any claim to the other's property. Plus, the wronged spouse can sue for additional emotional damages. Grant's endgame was crystal clear. He would walk away with $500,000 minimum. He would destroy my reputation. He would probably get more in a lawsuit, and I would have been so devastated, so confused, so desperate to protect my child that I wouldn't have fought back effectively. He was counting on my shame to make me compliant. He almost got away with it. Dr. Brennan pulled more documents from the folder. Molly had saved everything. Original sample records showing the switch, the donor's ID number, payment records that could be traced to accounts Grant controlled. There were even email communications between Grant and the embryologist. They thought they were being clever, using personal email accounts and vague language, but there was enough, more than enough. Molly had also tracked down the donor. His name was Derek Sykes, a 28-year-old graduate student who had been paid $15,000 in cash. Normal sperm donation pays maybe $100, sometimes $200. $15,000 should have been a massive red flag, but student loans don't pay themselves. Derek was told it was a private arrangement for a couple who wanted extra discretion. He had no idea he was part of a fraud. When he found out, he was furious and willing to cooperate. There was one more thing, Claire said carefully, something her own research had uncovered. Grant Mercer had $180,000 in gambling debts. He had been gambling for years. online poker, sports betting, casino trips he had told me were business conferences, all while pretending to be a responsible financial advisor with his life perfectly together. And the money for the bribes? The $50,000 he had paid to corrupt my IVF and frame me for adultery? He had embezzled it from his own clients. Small amounts over time, carefully hidden in the accounting. His firm had no idea yet. Grant wasn't just trying to steal my inheritance. He was a drowning man, grabbing at anything within reach. His gambling debts were crushing him. The people he owed money to weren't patient bankers. They were the kind of people who don't file lawsuits when you don't pay. I was supposed to be his life raft. My grandmother's money was supposed to save him, and he was willing to destroy me completely to get it. I sat in that office for a long time. The papers spread out in front of me, the truth burning a hole in my chest. Shock came first. Cold, paralyzing shock. Then disbelief. I kept reading the documents over and over, looking for some mistake, some misunderstanding that would make everything okay again. But the timeline was perfect. The details were too specific. Then the pieces started clicking together. The late nights, the secret phone calls, his obsession with accessing my money, his careful, calculated attention when we were dating. He had researched me before we ever met. The charity gala where we accidentally bumped into each other wasn't an accident at all. He knew exactly who I was and what I was worth before he ever said hello. The way he cried at our wedding, those tears, I thought they came from joy. They were tears of relief. His long con was finally paying off. And my mother, Vivian, who I had pushed away for 2 years, who I had called paranoid and jealous and overprotective, she had seen through him in 5 minutes. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. She tried to warn me. I chose him over her. I thought about crying. I thought about screaming. I thought about driving home and confronting him, throwing those papers in his face, watching him scramble to explain. But then something else happened. Something cold settled into my stomach, something sharp and focused and absolutely calm. He thought I was stupid. He had built this entire scheme on the assumption that I would crumble, that when his trap sprung, I would be so devastated by the proof of my infidelity that I would hand over whatever he wanted just to make it stop. He thought I was weak. He thought I was naive. He thought I was an easy mark. He had no idea who he had married. I looked at Dr. Brennan. Does he know that I know? No, she said. My sister hasn't told anyone else, and I only connected you to the case when I saw your file today. Good. I gathered the documents carefully. I need copies of everything, and I need you to connect me with Molly directly. What are you going to do? She asked. I stood up. My hand rested on my belly, on the baby who was completely innocent in all of this, a child who didn't choose their biology, a child I already loved, regardless of DNA tests or donor IDs or any of the ugliness swirling around their existence. My husband thinks he is playing chess, I said. He thinks he is 3 moves ahead. He thinks he has already won. I straightened my shoulders. He is about to find out I already flipped the board. I drove home from that appointment with my face carefully neutral, hands steady on the wheel, breathing even, just in case. Grant had installed security cameras around our house 2 years ago. At the time, he said it was for protection. Now, I wondered if it was surveillance. If he watched the footage, if he was tracking my expressions, my movements, looking for any sign that I suspected something. So, I gave him nothing. He was waiting when I got home, standing in the kitchen with that smile that didn't reach his eyes. My mother's words echoed in my head. 2 years too late. How was the appointment? He asked. Is the baby okay? I smiled back, walked over and hugged him, showed him the ultrasound photo Dr. Brennan had printed before everything changed. Perfect, I said. Everything is absolutely perfect. I deserve an Oscar for that performance. I smiled at him over dinner while mentally calculating how much his bail would be. I asked about his day while picturing him in an orange jumpsuit. I even laughed at his joke about baby names. It wasn't funny at all, but I committed to the role like my life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. I apologize for being paranoid lately. I blamed the hormones, using the exact same excuse he had thrown at me for months to dismiss my intuition. His whole body relaxed when he heard it. The tension in his shoulders melted away, and he let out a long breath, like a man who had just successfully navigated a minefield. He kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and went to take a shower. I listened to the water running and realized he thought he was still winning. He thought his plan was still perfectly on track. That night, he slept soundly beside me. He snored softly, arm thrown over his eyes, completely at peace. I lay awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling fans spinning in the dark, planning his destruction. It is a strange thing to lie next to your enemy, to hear them breathe, to feel their body heat, to smell the familiar scent of their shampoo, and know that they are actively plotting your ruin. I looked at his sleeping face in the moonlight. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like the man I had married, and that was the scariest part. The monster wasn't hiding under the bed. He was sleeping in it, and he wore the face of the person I loved most in the world. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I waited until Grant left for the office, kissing me goodbye with that same fake warmth before I moved. I drove 2 hours to a different city, checking my rearview mirrors constantly to make sure I wasn't being followed. Paranoia? Maybe. But I felt I had earned the right to be paranoid. I wasn't going to use anyone local. Grant had too many connections, too many casual acquaintances in our social circle. I needed a ghost. I found a private investigator named Rosalind Weaver. She was an ex-police detective with 15 years on the force before she went private. She had a small, cluttered office above a bakery that smelled like yeast and burnt coffee. Rosalind was a woman who looked like she had seen everything humanity had to offer and wasn't impressed by any of it. She had steel gray hair cut short, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a no-nonsense attitude that I instantly respected. I sat across from her at a metal desk piled high with manila folders and told her everything. I didn't hold back. I told her about the fertility clinic, the bribe, the fake donor, the plan to frame me, the prenup. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad with a cheap ballpoint pen. When I finished, she didn't look shocked. She didn't look pitying. She smiled. It was a terrifying smile, like a shark that had just spotted a bleeding swimmer in the water. "Your husband made a lot of mistakes," she said, her voice raspy from years of smoking. "Arrogant men always do. They think they are the smartest person in the room, so they get sloppy. They leave trails. Give me 2 weeks." I told her I didn't have 2 weeks. I needed everything she could find, and I needed it fast. I wrote her a check for a retainer that made her eyebrows go up, and she promised me results in 10 days. Those 10 days were the longest of my life. I had to go home every evening and play the role of the happy, oblivious wife. I had to ask Grant about his day and listen to his lies. I had to let him touch my belly and talk to the baby he had tried to erase from his lineage. It was physically painful. Every time he smiled at me, I wanted to scream. Every time he talked about our future, I wanted to throw up. But I didn't. I smiled. I nodded. I cooked his favorite meals. I became the perfect actress because I knew that if I slipped, even for a second, he might panic and destroy the evidence. I needed him comfortable. I needed him confident. I needed him to think he was untouchable. 10 days later, Rosalind called. "Meet me," she said. "Same place." When I walked into her office, she had a stack of files waiting for me. It was thick, much thicker than I expected. She gestured to the chair. "Sit down, Mrs. Wilson. You are going to want to be sitting for this." She called me Mrs. Wilson, not Mrs. Mercer. She knew. She started walking me through the findings, and it was worse than I could have imagined. Grant wasn't just a con man. He was a desperate, drowning man who had been treading water for years. First, the gambling. Grant's gambling debts totaled $180,000. He owed money to everyone. Online betting sites, underground poker games, bookies who operated out of the back of pool halls. The business conferences he had been going to for years, casino trips. The investment losses he had vaguely mentioned early in our marriage, bad beats at the poker table. He was an addict, chasing the high, convinced the next big win was just around the corner. But the win never came, only more debt. And the people he owed money to weren't banks. They were the kind of creditors who don't send overdue notices, they send guys with baseball bats. Rosalind showed me photos of Grant meeting with some very rough-looking men in parking lots. The fear on his face in those grainy images was real. He was terrified. That explained the urgency. That explained why he needed access to my trust funds so badly. He wasn't just greedy. He was in danger. He needed to pay these people off before they hurt him, and I was his piggy bank. Then came the embezzlement. Rosalind had a contact inside the firm where Grant worked. She had found irregularities in his client accounts. Approximately $53,000 was missing, siphoned off over 18 months in small transactions designed to avoid detection. He was stealing from his own clients to pay for the bribes at the fertility clinic. He had robbed grandmothers and retirees to fund the destruction of his own marriage. His firm had no idea yet, but it was a ticking time bomb. If they audited his accounts, he would be going to prison regardless of what happened with me. He was risking everything on this plan to frame me. It was his Hail Mary pass. If it worked, he would have $500,000 from the prenup. He could pay off his debts, replace the stolen money at work, and walk away clean. If it failed, he was dead. And then, just because he was a cliché wrapped in a suit, there was the affair. 8 months, his assistant. Her name was Tiffany, because of course it was. Rosalind laid out the photos. Hotel rooms, romantic dinners, weekend getaways disguised as business trips. There were text messages, credit card receipts, the whole pathetic collection. I looked at the photos of them laughing over drinks at a bar, his hand on her knee, looking at her with that same intense focus he used to give me. I wasn't heartbroken. I was insulted. I was almost offended by how unoriginal he was. If you are going to destroy your marriage and try to frame your pregnant wife, at least show some creativity. Having an affair with your assistant is literally Chapter 1 of the Cheating Husband Handbook. Not that such a handbook exists, but if it did, Grant would have highlighted that page and dog-eared the corner. Rosalind watched me look at the photos. "It gets better," she said, or worse, depending on how you look at it. This wasn't Grant's first attempt at landing a wealthy woman. 5 years ago, he lived in Boston. He dated a woman named Caroline Ashford. Family money, trust fund, the whole package. They were together for 8 months. He convinced her to open a joint investment account. She put in $200,000. 6 months later, the money was gone. Bad trades, he claimed. Market volatility. Caroline hired a forensic accountant. The money hadn't been lost in the market, it had been withdrawn. She ended things immediately, but she was too embarrassed to press charges. She didn't want the scandal. She let him walk away. Rosalind had tracked her down. Caroline was more than willing to provide a statement now. She had always regretted letting him go. She wanted justice. I left Rosalind's office with a box of evidence that weighed 20 pounds physically and 1,000 pounds emotionally. I drove to a park, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel. I had everything I needed to divorce him. I had enough to put him in jail for years. But I didn't just want a divorce. I didn't just want him gone. I wanted to burn his world down. I wanted him to feel the same humiliation, the same fear, the same absolute helplessness that he had planned for me. I wanted to destroy him publicly, thoroughly, and permanently. But to do that, I needed help. I needed the one person I had pushed away. The hardest call I made was to my mother. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number. 2 years of near silence, 2 years of choosing Grant over her. I had defended him when she questioned his motives. I had stopped inviting her to holidays. I had called her jealous, paranoid, unable to accept that I was happy. And she had been right about everything. Every single thing. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Daphne?" Her voice was cautious, hopeful, like she had been waiting for this call for 2 years but didn't want to jinx it. "Mom," I said. My voice cracked on the word, and I had to close my eyes to keep the tears back. "You were right. You were right about everything. about him. And I am so sorry. I am so sorry. There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. I braced myself. I braced myself for the anger, for the resentment, for the "I told you so" she had absolutely earned. I deserved it. I had been a terrible daughter. I had chosen a con man over the woman who raised me. But she didn't yell. She didn't gloat. She didn't remind me of every warning I had ignored. She simply asked, "What do you need, sweetheart?" That broke me. I started sobbing in the front seat of my car. I cried for the marriage I had lost, for the baby who would never know his father, for the time I had wasted. My mother just stayed on the line, murmuring soft comforts until I could breathe again. Then she went into work mode. My mother is a retired attorney, but she still knows everyone. Within 48 hours, she had connected me with the best divorce lawyer in Connecticut and a criminal prosecutor who specialized in fraud cases. She didn't just offer support, she built me an army. My mom taught me something that day that I will never forget. The people who really love you don't need to be right. They just need you to be okay. Real love isn't about keeping score. It is about showing up when things fall apart. Grant never understood that because he had never felt it, and he was certainly incapable of giving it. My lawyer was a woman named Sandra Kowalski. She was 5'2" with silver hair cut in a bob and reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of her nose. She looked like someone's sweet grandmother who bakes cookies on Sundays. Do not let the cardigan fool you. She was a shark in sensible shoes. We met in her conference room, my mother sitting beside me, holding my hand. Sandra reviewed everything: the clinic documents, Molly's statement, Rosalind's findings, the affair evidence, the embezzlement records. She read through the file in silence, occasionally making a small sound. When she finished, she took off her glasses and looked at me. Her eyes were hard and bright. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, ignoring my married name entirely, "your husband is facing fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement charges. The prenup infidelity clause works in your favor now because he is the one who has been cheating. And his little scheme to falsify medical records after the birth? That is conspiracy to commit fraud. We have evidence of intent." She leaned forward. "We are going to bury him." She coordinated with the prosecutor. We needed to lock down the witnesses. Molly Brennan, the nurse, was the key. I met with her in secret, at a coffee shop an hour from town where nobody would recognize either of us. She looked terrible. Thin, pale, dark circles under her eyes. She was vibrating with anxiety. She started crying the moment she saw me sit down. "I am so sorry," she kept saying. "I knew it was wrong, the money, and he was so convincing, and I thought maybe he really was just trying to protect you from some genetic issue." I stopped her. "I need to know one thing. Are you willing to testify officially? On the record? In open court?" She nodded without hesitation. "I will tell them everything. I should have gone to the police the day after it happened. I was just so scared of losing my license, my job, everything. But yes, whatever you need, I will say it under oath." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman had helped my husband try to destroy me. She had taken $30,000 to participate in a fraud that violated my body and my child. By any measure, she was complicit. I should have hated her. But looking at her shaking hands and her terrified eyes, I couldn't find the hate. Grant had manipulated her the same way he had manipulated me. He had found her weakness, her debt, her desperation, and he had exploited it. He was the architect, she was just a tool. "Don't be scared anymore," I told her. "You are not the villain in this story. He is." The embryologist was a harder nut to crack, but once he learned Molly was cooperating and had kept records implicating him, he developed a sudden and convenient conscience. He gave his own statement to Rosalind's team. He was terrified of losing his medical license and going to prison. He would say whatever we needed to put Grant away to save his own skin. And then there was Derek Sykes, the donor. The innocent 28-year-old grad student who had been duped. My investigator found him. He was horrified. He thought he was helping a couple privately. When he found out his DNA had been used in a fraud scheme, he was furious. He agreed to testify immediately. We had them all. The circle was complete. 6 weeks after that ultrasound appointment, I was ready. The trap was set. I suggested to Grant that we throw a celebration, a baby moon party at my grandmother's estate. We could invite both families, close friends, his colleagues. An afternoon garden gathering to celebrate the baby coming soon. I watched his face closely when I suggested it. His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. It was exactly what he wanted. More witnesses to his devoted husband performance. More people who would see him as the loving father-to-be. More people who would feel sorry for him later when his wife was exposed as a cheater. He saw it as an opportunity to cement his narrative. "That is a wonderful idea," he said, kissing my cheek. "Let me help plan everything." No, I said, patting his chest. "You have been working so hard lately. All those late nights at the office. Let me handle the party. You just show up and enjoy it." He had no idea that my version of handling everything included police officers waiting in the guest house, my lawyer stationed near the bar disguised as a guest, Derek Sykes ready to testify, and his own parents about to learn exactly who their son really was. The week leading up to the party was surreal. Grant was in high spirits. He was almost giddy. He was making calls, inviting important clients, ensuring the right people would be there. He wanted an audience. I let him invite everyone. The more, the better. I wanted everyone he respected, everyone he tried to impress, to be there to see his fall. The morning of the party, Saturday, broke clear and sunny. It was a perfect New England spring day. Grant spent the morning in the bathroom. I watched him through the crack in the door. He was practicing his expressions in the mirror. He would adjust his tie, then smile, a warm, benevolent, fatherly smile. Then he would frown, looking concerned and serious. Then he would practice a look of shock. He was rehearsing the emotions he planned to use when he found out the baby wasn't his. It was chilling. This man I had shared a bed with for 3 years, who I had trusted with my life, was literally rehearsing his reaction to my destruction. He thought he was walking into his crowning achievement. He had no idea he was walking into his own funeral. The guests started arriving at 1 o'clock. The estate looked magnificent. My grandmother's gardens were in full bloom, a riot of roses, hydrangeas, and peonies. White tents were set up on the back lawn. Waiters circulated with champagne on silver trays. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the fountain. It was the picture of old money elegance. 50 guests milled about in their Sunday best. Grant's parents had driven up from Maryland. They were beaming. His mother, a sweet woman who had always been kind to me, kept clutching my arm. "I always knew he would make a wonderful father," she told me, eyes misty. "Such a good boy, such a caring husband." It made my stomach turn. She had no idea she was about to watch her son get arrested. His father walked around shaking hands, chest puffed out, proud of the family Grant was supposedly building. The Mercer name was being carried forward. My own mother stood near the dessert table. She looked regal in a navy dress. She was watching Grant with the patient, predatory expression of a cat observing a mouse that doesn't know it is trapped. She caught my eye across the lawn and raised her champagne glass slightly. A silent signal. Almost time. Grant was in his absolute element. He was working the crowd like a politician at a fundraiser. Handshakes, backslaps, that charming laugh he had perfected. His hand kept finding my belly for photos. Every time someone pointed a camera, there he was, the devoted father-to-be, gazing at me with what looked like adoration. He was so good at pretending to be human. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The feeling lasted approximately 3 seconds before I remembered the $50,000 he had spent trying to destroy my life. Sympathy evaporated pretty quickly after that. Around 3 o'clock, Grant did exactly what I knew he would do. He had been dropping hints for weeks about wanting to celebrate fatherhood with a grand gesture. At the party, he brought it up loudly, making sure plenty of people could hear. "You know what we should do, honey." He pulled me close, arm around my waist, playing to the crowd. His voice was projected, theatrical. "I have been thinking. Let's get one of those DNA test kits. We can frame the results for the nursery. Proof that daddy and baby are connected forever. Wouldn't that be special?" Several guests made "ah" sounds. His mother dabbed her eyes again. I pretended to hesitate, playing the shy, reluctant wife. "Oh, I don't know, Grant. That seems like a lot of trouble. Come on, he pressed, smiling that dazzling smile. It will be amazing. We could even open the results right here, right now. Make it part of the celebration. What do you think, everyone? Encouraging murmurs from the crowd. Someone said, "How sweet." Someone else mentioned they wished their husband was that thoughtful. Well, I said, looking around, playing my part perfectly, if everyone thinks it is a good idea. Grant was practically glowing. This was his moment. The trap he had spent over a year building was about to snap shut. He could already taste my money. He could taste the victory. He thought he was the smartest man in the world. He just didn't realize whose neck was in the trap. Instead of pulling out a DNA kit, I walked toward the small platform we had set up near the fountain. It was meant for toasts and speeches. I picked up the microphone. The feedback whined for a second, silencing the crowd. The string quartet stopped playing. Grant smiled up at me from the grass, champagne flute in hand. He looked like the king of the world. He was already rehearsing his shocked face for later. "Thank you all for coming today," I said. My voice was steady, stronger than I felt. "This party is supposed to be about celebration, about family, about truth." I found Grant's eyes in the crowd. He nodded encouragingly, thinking I was playing right into his hands. "My husband said he wanted to reveal something special today," I continued, "so I am going to help him do exactly that." His smile flickered just for a second, a tiny crack in the porcelain mask. He sensed a shift in my tone. I reached under the podium and pulled out the thick manila folder. 3 months ago, I learned something about my husband that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I want to share it with all of you today because Grant is right. This should be about truth. Grant's smile was frozen now. His champagne glass had stopped halfway to his lips. The air in the garden seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Grant and I struggled with fertility," I said into the microphone. "His diagnosis meant natural conception was impossible for us, so we did IVF at a clinic he chose." I held up the first document. It fluttered in the breeze. "These are the records from that clinic, the original records, before anyone had a chance to alter them." I let that word hang in the air. Alter. Grant's face went pale. He took half a step forward, confusing dancing in his eyes. "These records show that my husband bribed 2 clinic employees to switch his sperm sample with donor sperm. He paid $30,000 to a nurse. He paid the embryologist. And he paid $15,000 to a young man named Derek Sykes." I gestured toward the edge of the crowd, near the rose bushes. Derek stepped forward. He looked nervous but determined. A 28-year-old grad student who thought he was helping an infertile couple privately, not participating in fraud. Grant had paid him to provide the sperm that was used to conceive my child, without my knowledge, without my consent. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Grant's mother grabbed his father's arm to steady herself. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered on the patio stones with a sharp crack. "My husband's plan was simple," I continued, my voice gaining power with every word. "Wait until our child was born. Demand a DNA test. And when the results proved he wasn't the biological father, which he already knew would happen because he orchestrated it, he would accuse me of having an affair." I held up the prenup. Our prenup has an infidelity clause. If I had supposedly cheated, I would owe him $500,000 in penalties. Plus, he could sue for damages. He could take everything my grandmother left me. Grant found his voice. It came out strangled, high-pitched, desperate. "Daphne, honey, this is insane. You are confused. It is the pregnancy, the hormones. You are not thinking clearly. Stop this." He started moving toward the stage, his hands raised. "I am not finished," I shouted into the microphone. The sound boomed off the guest house walls. The crowd went dead silent. Grant froze. In addition to bribing the fertility clinic, my husband embezzled approximately $50,000 from his clients at his firm to fund this scheme. I looked directly at a man standing near the bar, Grant's boss, Mr. Henderson, who had been quietly invited by my mother. His firm is now aware and investigating. Mr. Henderson set down his drink slowly. His face was thunderous. He stared at Grant with pure disgust. My husband also has $180,000 in gambling debts, money he owes to people who don't take late payments kindly, and for the past 8 months, I pulled out the photographs, large, glossy prints. I fanned them out like a deck of cards. He has been having an affair with his assistant. Grant's mother let out a sound like she had been punched in the stomach. She sagged against his father. I displayed the photos to the front row. Restaurant dinners, hotel entrances, kissing in a parking lot. The kind of evidence that removes all possibility of denial. This wasn't even his first attempt, I added, twisting the knife. 5 years ago in Boston, he targeted another woman with family money. That relationship ended when she discovered he had drained her investment account. She has provided a sworn statement to investigators. Grant's champagne glass finally slipped from his fingers. It hit the stone patio and exploded, champagne spraying across his expensive Italian shoes. Those are lies, he stammered, looking around wildly. She is making this up. She is mentally unstable. Mom, Dad, don't listen to her. The pregnancy has affected her mind. Grant. His own mother's voice cut through the noise. It was quiet, but sharp enough to draw blood. Is any of this true? He turned to face her. He opened his mouth to deny everything, to spin one last lie. But nothing came out. He looked at the photos. He looked at his boss. He looked at Derek Sykes. And he knew. He knew it was over. Molly Brennan stepped forward from where she had been standing near the guest house. She was pale, but she held her head high. I am the nurse he bribed, she said, her voice shaking but audible. I have documentation of everything. I have already given my statement to the police. Derek Sykes spoke up next. He paid me $15,000 cash. I have the messages. I have the receipts. Grant looked around at the faces of the people who had been laughing with him 10 minutes ago. His colleagues, his family, the society friends he had worked so hard to impress. Everyone was staring at him like he was something rotting that they had just discovered on their shoe. The disgust was palpable. It was heavy in the air. Then, the door to the guest house opened. 2 uniformed police officers stepped out. They walked calmly across the lawn, their boots crunching on the gravel. Grant Mercer? The first officer asked. His voice was professionally neutral. You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. They pulled his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the garden. Grant tried one last time, one final desperate manipulation. He looked at me as they walked him past the stage. Daphne, please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I love you. Think about our baby. Think about our family. Don't do this. I looked down at him. I looked at the man who had tried to steal my life. You are absolutely right, Grant, I said. We just worked it out. I watched the police car drive away down the long gravel path. It moved slowly, past the gardens my grandmother had planted half a century ago, through the iron gates of the property Grant had wanted so desperately to own. The red and blue lights flashed against the trees, a stark, violent contrast to the peaceful afternoon sunlight. I stood there on the grass, hand on my belly, watching until the car turned onto the main road and disappeared. 50 guests stood in absolute silence behind me. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was as if the entire party had been holding its breath for an hour and didn't know how to exhale. Then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was warm and steady. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. My mother walked up beside me, not saying a word, and just wrapped her arm around my shoulders. She pulled me in close, the way she used to when I was a little girl with a scraped knee. I leaned into her. I let my weight fall against her. I am proud of you, she said quietly, her voice right by my ear. Your grandmother would be too. And for the first time in months, for the first time since I saw those papers in the doctor's office, I took a full, deep breath. The air smelled like lavender and freshly cut grass, and it tasted like freedom. The fallout was swift and brutal. Grant was denied bail at his arraignment the following Monday. The judge, a stern woman with zero patience for white-collar nonsense, declared him a flight risk. Between his massive gambling debts and the dangerous people he owed money to, there was too much chance he would try to disappear. Those gambling creditors got very interested very quickly once the arrest made the news. They had been patient while Grant had a wealthy wife, assuming he would eventually pay up. That patience evaporated the moment they realized the money train had derailed. I heard from my lawyer that Grant was placed in protective custody almost immediately. Apparently, he was safer in a cell than he would have been on the street. It is a special kind of irony when prison becomes your sanctuary. His affair partner, the assistant named Tiffany, didn't stick around to support him. She resigned from his firm the morning after the party. She didn't even clean out her desk. She just sent a 2-line email to HR and vanished. She didn't wait for the handcuffs to click shut before she ran. I have seen rats leave sinking ships with more loyalty. At least rats have the decency to look back once. She changed her number, deleted her social media, and presumably moved to a town where nobody knew her name. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But she knew he was married. She knew she was sleeping with a man who had a pregnant wife at home. She was part of the toxicity, and she deserved the fear she was living in. Grant's firm completed their internal investigation within 2 weeks. The forensic accountants tore through his records like hungry wolves. The $53,000 I had uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. He had been borrowing from accounts for years, moving money around in a complex shell game to cover his tracks. They filed their own criminal charges. The woman from Boston, Caroline Ashford, came forward publicly once she heard about the arrest. She gave an interview to a local paper. She said she had spent 5 years feeling stupid for falling for his act, too embarrassed to pursue justice. She said watching him get arrested was the closure she didn't know she needed. Her statement added another layer to the case prosecutors were building. It established a pattern. It proved this wasn't a one-time mistake born of desperation. It was a lifestyle. Grant was a predator who specialized in women with assets and trusting hearts. The divorce was finalized in record time. Usually, these things drag on for months, sometimes years. Not this time. Grant's lawyer tried to negotiate at the beginning, tried to argue for some kind of settlement. My lawyer, Sandra, literally laughed in his face. She threw the prenup on the table. The infidelity clause, the one Grant had been planning to weaponize against me, worked perfectly in my favor. Now, he was the one who had been unfaithful for 8 months. He owed me $500,000, not the other way around. Not that he had anything to give. Every asset he claimed to own was either borrowed, stolen, or imaginary. We took everything. The car he drove? Leased in my name. The watch he wore? A gift from me, which I took back. The expensive suits? Bought with our joint credit card, which I canceled. He left the marriage with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mountain of legal debt. The criminal case moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Molly Brennan testified with a shaky voice but a clear memory. She recounted every conversation, every bribe, every moment of guilt. The jury listened, spellbound. The embryologist cooperated fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. He walked the court through the technical details of the swap, explaining exactly how they had bypassed the clinic's security protocols. It was chilling to hear how easy it had been for them to violate the most intimate part of my life for a few $1,000s. Derek Sykes provided his statement, confirming he had no knowledge of the fraud. The paper trail Grant thought he had hidden wasn't hidden at all. Digital forensics recovered deleted emails, text messages, and bank transfers. Fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement. Each charge stuck. Each charge carried years. Grant's parents stopped coming to court after the first week. The humiliation was too much for them. They were prominent people in their community, and this scandal was destroying their social standing. His father released a stiff, formal statement saying that Grant had made choices that no parent can defend, and that they were praying for everyone involved. It was the polite, legal way of saying, "We disown him." His mother checked into a wellness facility for exhaustion, which is what wealthy people call it when they can't face reality. I saw Grant look for them in the gallery every day. Every time the heavy wooden doors opened, his head would snap around, hope flickering in his eyes. And every time, when he saw they weren't there, he would slump a little lower in his chair. He was alone, truly, completely alone. The day the verdict was read, I was in the courtroom. I sat in the back row, wearing a simple black dress. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to know that I was still standing. When the jury foreman read the word guilty on the first count, Grant closed his eyes. By the time they got to the fifth guilty, he was weeping. Not the pretty, single tear crying he had done at our wedding. This was ugly, heaving, sobbing. He was realizing that his life as he knew it was over. He would spend the next 8 to 10 years in a federal prison. When he eventually got out, he would be a felon. He would have no money, no career, no family willing to acknowledge him, no future targets who wouldn't find his criminal record with a simple Google search of his name. The trap he had built so patiently and so carefully had snapped shut on his own neck. My baby was born 4 months after the party. It was a humid August night. My mother drove me to the hospital, timing my contractions with a calm, military precision. She held my hand through 12 hours of labor. She wiped my forehead with cool cloths. She told me I was strong. She told me I could do this. And when the doctor finally handed me my son, when I felt that warm, wet weight on my chest and heard his first cry, the last lingering shadow of Grant Mercer vanished from my soul. I looked at my baby's face. He had my nose. He had my grandmother's chin. He was perfect. He was absolutely innocent in everything that had happened. I named him Leo after my grandfather, a strong name, a Wilson name. Some people asked me later if I was going to contact Derek Sykes, if I was going to include him in Leo's life somehow. I thought about it. I really did. I lay awake for nights wrestling with the ethics of it. But Derek was a 28-year-old grad student who had made a dumb decision for money he desperately needed. He wasn't ready to be a father. He didn't want to be a father. He had signed away his rights thinking he was helping an anonymous couple. Dragging him into this, forcing a relationship he never asked for, didn't feel right. And honestly, I didn't need him to be a father. Leo would have me. He would have my mother, finally back in my life where she belonged. He would have the entire Wilson family, the legacy my grandmother built over decades of love and work. He would grow up in a house filled with history and strength. That was more than enough. That was everything. I learned something profound through all of this, something they don't teach you in school. Family isn't about DNA. It is not about blood tests or biology or genetic matches on a chart. Grant was my husband, my legal family, and he tried to destroy me. Derek was the biological father, and he was a stranger. Family is about who shows up. It is about who stays. It is about who chooses you every single day, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. My mother chose me when I didn't deserve it. She chose me when I had pushed her away, when I had insulted her, when I had cut her out. She swallowed her pride and came running the second I called. That is what real love looks like. It isn't flashy. It isn't a grand speech at a gala. It is answering the phone at 2 a.m. It is sitting in a lawyer's office holding your hand. It is making sure you eat when you are too sad to cook. Grant never understood that because he viewed relationships as transactions. He thought love was something you traded for value. He didn't know that real love is a gift you give without expecting a receipt. My mother and I have lunch every week now. We are making up for 2 lost years, one conversation at a time. It isn't always easy. We have scars. There are moments of awkwardness, moments where the ghost of my betrayal hangs between us. But we are doing the work. She comes over to the estate on Sundays to see Leo. Watching her with him is the greatest joy of my life. She sits in the rocking chair, the same one she rocked me in, and sings him the same old lullabies. One afternoon, while she was feeding him a bottle, I finally asked her the question that had been burning in my mind. "Mom," I said, "you knew. You knew from the very first moment that Grant was bad news. You were right for years, and I treated you horribly. Why didn't you ever say, 'I told you so'? Why didn't you rub it in?" She set down her coffee cup and looked at me. Her eyes were soft. "Daphne," she said, "being right isn't important. You are. And honestly, watching you take down that man with such precision, watching you stand up for yourself and protect your child, that was more satisfying than any 4 words could ever be. You didn't need me to tell you he was bad. You needed to find your own strength to leave him, and you did. I am just glad I got to see it." I laughed. It was the first real belly-shaking laugh I had felt in what seemed like forever. She was right. She usually is. 3 weeks after the sentencing, early on a Tuesday morning, I sat in my grandmother's kitchen. My kitchen now. I looked around at the space Grant had coveted so desperately. He had wanted to remodel it. He had wanted to tear out the original cabinets, replace the vintage tiles with cold, modern marble. He wanted to erase the history. I ran my hand over the worn wooden table where I had eaten breakfast every day before school. Sunlight poured through the windows that had watched 4 generations of Wilson women live their lives. They had seen births and deaths, weddings and heartbreaks. They had seen the Depression and wars and peace, and now they had seen me survive. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, my grandmother's recipe, her favorite brand. Some traditions are worth keeping. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. I didn't have to worry about a phone being face down on the table. I didn't have to wonder if the person smiling at me was calculating my net worth. I was just me. Daphne. Mother. Daughter. Survivor. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from my mother. Lunch tomorrow? I smiled and typed back, always. Bring wine. I walked outside into the garden. The air was crisp, hinting at autumn. The roses my grandmother planted when she was a young bride were starting to fade, but the late-blooming hydrangeas she added when my mother was born were bursting with color, deep blues and purples. I walked to the lavender border I had helped her install when I was 10 years old. I remembered my small hands patting the dirt around each seedling while she told me stories about our family. She told me that Wilson women don't break. She told me we are like the gardens we tend. We have deep roots. Storms might strip our leaves, winter might freeze the ground, but we always come back. We always bloom again. I put my hand on my belly, even though Leo was sleeping safely in his crib inside. I felt a phantom kick, a memory of the life I had carried through the storm. Grant Mercer had tried to take everything from me, my money, my reputation, my future, my peace. He thought he could hollow me out and fill the empty space with his own greed, but all he actually did was show me exactly how strong I had always been. He stripped away the naivety, yes, he took away my innocence, but he revealed the steel underneath. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for karma to arrive. They wait for the universe to balance the scales. I was lucky. I didn't have to wait. I got to deliver my karma in person, with documentation, in front of 50 witnesses and a string quartet. I sat on the stone bench near the fountain and closed my eyes, listening to the water. I thought about Grant, sitting in a cell right now, staring at a concrete wall. I wondered if he finally understood his mistake. He thought he married an easy target. He thought he married a lonely girl with too much money and not enough sense. He thought he married a victim. He was wrong. He married a Wilson. And now he had plenty of time to think about the difference. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey, and sharing it has been part of my healing. If you enjoyed this, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I have so many more stories to share, and I love reading your comments. Tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have confronted him privately, or did he deserve the public takedown? Let me know below. I read every single comment, and it truly means the world to me. See you in the next video. 2 uniformed police officers stepped out. They walked calmly across the lawn, their boots crunching on the gravel. "Grant Mercer?" the first officer asked. His voice was professionally neutral. "You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent." They pulled his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the garden. Grant tried one last time, one final desperate manipulation. He looked at me as they walked him past the stage. "Daphne, please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I love you. Think about our baby. Think about our family. Don't do this." I looked down at him. I looked at the man who had tried to steal my life. "You are absolutely right, Grant," I said. "We just worked it out."